There's something inherently personifying about imaginative life, which is to say, imaginative life brings the world into being, not just as a place through which we pass, but also as a place filled with persons. So this is a video about describing that experience and also thinking through and building in a conceptual framework to help us notice and better understand and enhance that experience. And we're going to do that through the lens of animism. So in the previous video in this series, we spoke about how images are places that we find ourselves in, immersive imagination. Animistic imagination adds to that and allows us to notice and name and value not just the place that we find ourselves in imaginatively, but the persons, the people that we find in that place. Because animism is the attribution of personhood beyond just human persons into the mountain person, the sky person, the tree person, the plant person, the puppy person, even the postbox person. As Gordon White defines it, the belief of the world as made up of persons, only some of whom are humans. So animistic imagination allows us to name what perhaps we see most clearly in childhood as the not just the embodied and sensuous experience of the world, but the world as enchanted, as story-filled, and inherently personified. One of my earliest and sweetest memories is sitting by a riverbank in the Highlands, gazing into a little pool, isolated from the river with the tide, and being fascinated by the little fish persons that were swimming around there. Just one person, actually. And I remember being caught up in thinking imagining myself as the fish person, trying to find all its fish brothers and sisters. And the story ends when my grandfather, fly fishing nearby, hooked me in the hair with his fly hook fish rod. And that was the end of that story. But I like to think I remember it not just for the sudden shock of the barb in my skin, but for a time when I was drawn into the world of other persons, when I was imaginatively engaged with fish persons and puppy persons and plant persons as persons just like me. Now the thing is, while that's cute in childhood, it kind of gets knocked out of you, because after a while it's not so cute and people start telling you, don't be silly, fish aren't really lonely or looking for their brothers and sisters, or the cloud in the sky isn't cold, or whatever it is. It's like the animistic personifying imaginative process that just seems to be inherently there in childhood gets taken out of the world and stuffed into our heads, into our minds, and the world becomes disenchanted and full of not mountain persons and river persons, but dead mountains and inanimate rivers. And images become internalized, not as living others that we encounter in an animate world, but psychological objects, internalizations of memories that perhaps we project onto the world and mistakenly attribute the world to be cold or lonely and searching for its siblings, but correctly belong inside our minds, or perhaps in Walt Disney movies where we safely tuck away talking and singing teapots and kettles. But actually, animistic imagination is a normal everyday experience. And one of the most common places that you can find animism alive and well in your life is in the normal practice of reading text on a page. So David Abraham, he writes, "The inert letters on the page now speak to us, a form of animism that we take for granted, but it is animism nonetheless, as mysterious as a talking stone." So you scan your eyes across the page and you see the ink on the page, and a story appears with persons, with their thoughts and their voices. And we kind of take that for granted, but it's the same process that goes on for a traditional indigenous person, perhaps living in the Australian outback, and they and how they read the sky. They read the weather patterns in the sky, or they read their history and their ancestors in the rock face, in the creek, in the rock face. The patterns in the rock face tell a story. Or the tracks on the ground, hunting the animals and avoiding the dangers. They tell a story, they come alive, and the world that they pass through is story-filled and filled with persons, animal persons, ancestor persons, rock persons, sky persons. Again, as David Abraham writes, "The earthly world is felt as a vast, ever-unfolding story in which we, along with the other animals, plants, and landforms, are all characters, a terrain filled with imagination." The earthly world is felt as a vast, ever-unfolding story, a terrain filled with imagination. So animism gives us a framework to notice and validate and enhance the imaginative experience of finding ourselves in a story world filled with persons, autonomous persons, just like us, persons with awareness. Just as we're aware of them, they're aware of us. Just as we have intentions towards them, they have intentions towards us. Whatever that is, wherever that is. So if you're reading a novel or watching a movie, maybe that's more straightforward. We're drawn into the life of the story characters. And to the extent that we're immersed in and carried away and enjoying that experience, we will believe in those persons, not just as constructs of the writer or the director's mind, not just as kind of like sort of ciphers for ideas. They will be persons. Similarly, in any kind of like dream work, waking dreams, imaginative exploration in guided imagery or active imagination, the characters that we encounter, the witches, the trolls, the children, we can attribute to them, grant them the status of persons, and that will so enrich our encounter and bring imagination to life. It will create an edginess that is just not there if we assume these characters to be parts of us or projections of our psyche or internalizations from memory. An inner witch is somehow safer and tamer, it's a sort of idea really, than the image of an actual witch who's a person that we're with. And then if we spill that over into our ongoing life, obviously there are human persons who, to be honest, a lot of the time don't get treated as persons either, because imagination's been stripped out of normal everyday life too, and we can treat other people as objects to be avoided or manipulated or be taken advantage of, and indeed we get treated by other persons as objects, none of which is rather pleasant or conducive to a healthy creative life. Okay, so a few ideas there on the animistic aspect of imaginative life, the third in our series. So that brings to the end the videos exploring the experience of imaginative life as embodied, immersive and animistic. In the next video, we're going to start to look at the metaphors through which we understand and experience imaginative life. And indeed how metaphor takes us to the heart of imaginative life. The first metaphor of which will be the mind as machine. So in the next video we'll look at mechanistic imagination and how to avoid it, because it tends to impoverish our imagination. Anyway, thanks for watching to the end of this rather long video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.